So one of the smartest sales plays that you can ever make is to keep track of job changes across your power users and people you've had meetings with in the past in your pipeline. And the moment they switch their jobs, reach out to them and try to engage. Your ability to convert them into pipeline is very, very high at that point. Now, there are entire products out there that actually do exactly that. I can think of User Gems. I think Champify is another one. These are great products, but I like to build stuff myself. I took an afternoon to build this exact flow of how you can keep track of people's job changes and reach out to them via email using Clay and Make.com. So in this video, I'm going to go dive into that. If you're interested in it, follow along. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all the people that I've had meetings with, sales meetings with over the last month, use Make.com to get a hold of their email addresses, and then push those email addresses into Clay. And then in Clay, figure out whether or not they've changed their jobs. And if they've changed their jobs, I'm going to find their work email addresses. And then eventually we're going to push them into Instantly for doing an email campaign. Now, of course, you can use something other than Make.com. Zapier, great product. There are other alternatives. But, hopefully this will give you a good sense, and then you can recreate this using your own tools. This is a Make.com sequence. It allows me to do some, no-code, low-code programming. That's really helpful. The first step in this sequence is for me to scrape my calendar, connect my Google Calendar. Let's start 1 month ago and today. And that's it. Just scrape all the events in my calendar. I'll put a limit of 2,000 events. Once I get these events, the next thing I want to do is I want to figure out who are all the attendees in these meetings. So for that, I add this iterator, and all you have to do is to basically select out of the list of things that got scraped from the Google Calendar what you want to iterate over it. And so what I want to do is I want to look at the attendees. System is already set up, so I just look at the attendees. Then I do a filter. In the filter, I say that the iterator outputs a certain structure where, I get, say, the email address, and all I say is take the email and make sure that it is not, say, one of my colleagues at heysam.ai. It's not a personal email address. And you can put any sort of rules over here to make sure that you sort of like filter out emails that do not represent a sales conversation, right? Now I have, coming out of this iterator, I have sort of like one email at a time, the people that I've had meetings with in the last month. From here, I can simply push these emails into Clay. But I don't want to do that. Why? Because as I push, say I run this job today, and let's say I run the job tomorrow again, I can duplicate the emails in Clay. I use a very, very simple technique. I basically create this spreadsheet, and literally is just a column A, where I can put email addresses. Now, right in the beginning, it was literally just like this. What it is doing is I'm checking if the emails coming out of the iterator already exist in my spreadsheet. So what I do over here is I connect with my spreadsheet. I say hit up the spreadsheet, make test, and make sure then column A, like the email that's coming in from the iterator, if it matches the column A, where the column A is this. So if there's a match, just return one row. That's it. So it's literally testing for the existence of this email in my spreadsheet. Next thing I do is I want to make sure that this is a net new email, or the spreadsheet, it's not included in the spreadsheet. Okay, so the way we do that is by looking at the row number coming out of this previous test. I want to make sure that it does not exist. If it does not exist, then, this is a net new email. Once we have that, then now, of course, we can push this into Clay at this point. But before we do that, we want to add it to the Google Sheet. If we rerun this job, we don't want to, reprocess this email over and over again. So what we do then is we do another Google Sheets thing where I push this into my spreadsheet again. And I take the email and now put this in column A. And I go ahead and save it. That's it. And once this module runs, the email will get added to this little column. And that way we end up having deduplication. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a JSON that I can push via HTTP to Clay. And all this is doing, it's creating a JSON payload where one key is called email, and it has the same email that came out of this iterator. And the other one is a user one. You don't have to worry about it. This is part of my workflow. It doesn't have to be part of yours. And the last thing we do is we push into Clay. We literally have this Clay URL that we can push into. And, we end up taking the JSON string that was coming out of this module. And we literally just say body type raw, the content type is JSON, and then I just include that JSON string. and I push this into Clay. Once I run this, the whole job will run and items will get added to my Clay table. I had created this one for webhooks. So the way you have to do this is you have to create a Clay table that can take a webhook, I believe. And the way you do that is by creating a table and then going into this sort of like other import data from webhook. So once you do that, this table can now take API pushes. When the table first gets created, I just have an email address. I add a basic blacklist column just so that, for instance, if somebody's not an engineer that I've had a meeting with, I can remove them. The next thing we do is we figure out, well, what is the name of the company that I met them at, that they were at when we met, right? So we basically take their email, convert that into an email domain. That's very simple. From this email domain, I hit up OpenAI, and all I do is I say, I give this custom prompt and say, I'll give you an email domain. Your job is to predict the name of the company. That's it. I give it a couple of examples, and out pops the name of the company. If it gets it wrong, so for instance, over here, it gets it wrong. It calls it Vividly Tech. I just override it. So I create a text field called override. I say this is the actual name. And from there, I basically take either the override if it's available or the name of the company. So that's this column right here. So it says either take the override if it's populated, otherwise take the output of the OpenAI call. And now for each person that I ever had meetings with over the last 3-4 months, I now have the name of the company, where they were at when I met them. Now the second part of the job is to go figure out, well, how do we find what company they're currently at? To do that, I simply added an enrichment that goes from their work email address to their LinkedIn profile. So I get their LinkedIn profiles. Now, of course, I do a quick scan and make sure that this is, you don't want to pick the wrong person accidentally. And so I do a manual check and make sure that the LinkedIn profiles are correct. I mark it and then I provide the correct LinkedIn profile. I get the corrected LinkedIn profile, which is either this or this, right? If this is populated, and take it. So now I have the corrected LinkedIn profile. I can simply enrich the person. So I get the actual person. From the person, this is where the trick happens. I have this effectively code that says, let's take their set of experiences, turn them into an array, and find the first one or the latest experience that does not include the word advisor, board, investor, or retired. You can similarly imagine sabbatical, things like that. So if this is too daunting for you, literally just use the use AI option from Clay. This is just basic JavaScript, so I just actually use OpenAI. So from here now, I get effectively the latest company that they're currently part of. From that, I just, take that out into a separate column called what's the name of the latest company? It's Databricks. Databricks.com is the name of the email domain. What I do next is I have this little flag over here that says, did they change their jobs? And this is where some interesting stuff happens. What we want to do is we want to make sure that the latest company is not the same as the company that I met them at. The way I do that is by just, again, writing this little JavaScript over here for this checkbox that says, if you lowercase the name of the latest company and, you get rid of white space and things like that, you want to make sure that the company that I met them at is not, the name of that company, any part of it is not included within this latest company name, and the other way around. If there's any overlap, then that means they probably are still at the same job that they were at when I met them. But if there's no overlap, then most likely they have changed their jobs. So let me quickly show you what happens over here. So now I say, did they change their jobs? It's checked. And now I get these like 20 odd people out of these 295 who've actually changed their jobs. And from here, I can figure out what the new work email is. I can now add them to instantly. So for instance, over here, I can literally do instantly add lead to campaign, and I can pick a campaign that I'm doing, right? So I can add the latest work email, hit, and now the email gets added to my campaign and it goes out. That's it. It's that simple. The most difficult part of this is the JavaScript code. And again, if that feels a little too much, it's okay. You may have an engineer next to you who knows JavaScript and they can sort of like do it for you. And even if you don't, just ask Clay's AI. And even if that feels too much, then just ask OpenAI. That's literally how I did that. This whole flow can run once a month for me, for people that I want to reach out to and re-engage once they switch their jobs. That's it. Thanks, guys. Bye.